So yeah, you're probably wondering, why is China building a bunch of escalators in the middle of nowhere that are not connected to anything, that go nowhere, that serve no purpose? Well, I can tell you, as someone that lived in China for 10 years, I don't ask why are they doing this. I say, of course they're doing this. Because China is chock full of so many different ridiculous government projects that just get lost in translation or rotten from corruption from the inside out that it would make your head spin. So why don't we talk about some of the absolute most ridiculous, most dangerous, and craziest government projects that China is doing right at this moment. As you can see here, our first example, our beautiful escalator that goes into the middle of nowhere. Wouldn't you like if you lived in Idaho somewhere, and then you're walking through the woods, and then all of a sudden you see a big dirt pile, and all of a sudden, randomly, there's a escalator going up it, but there's nothing at the top. What would you say? What would you do? Well, it turns out around China, there was a government initiative to make lives of farmers or agricultural type people easier. So they got some government funding to put in some escalators that I guess go up to the crops or go up to where people are planting. That was the initial idea. That's what's being speculated. But a lot of Chinese people in the countryside are very, very confused as to why this is actually happening. But it doesn't stop there. Sometimes it can actually become rather hilarious. Behold the mighty reveal, the double toilet. Now this is good luck. This is fantastic. In Chinese, you should know that double of something or shuang is very, very lucky. So 2 toilets is especially lucky. Now, why would something like this happen? Funnily enough, people around the world know that China has a really, really bad sanitation system. It's a very, very dirty country.
This is pretty disgusting. This guy's kitchen. See, there's his cooking stuff. There are his woks on the wall. Is his toilet. Toilet and kitchen in one. See, they're even like vegetables and stuff here ready, and eggs ready to be prepared. It's gross, dude. It's fucking gross.
If you get outside the main city centers, it's absolutely filthy. And that's just because there's tons of people. It's not very developed. The infrastructure is just not there. But in particular, the plumbing and the sewage and the toilet situations, absolutely nightmarish. The toilets that I saw around China were actually shocking. So Xi Jinping came up with the toilet campaign, and that was to revitalize China's toilet situation. Now, of course, this had pretty much zero effect on most of the country, but in some of the tourist hotspots and some of the major city centers, they put in some actual toilets. You know, most of the toilets in China you got to squat on. They put some actual Western toilets that you sit on in some of these city centers. And of course, a lot got lost in translation. Number 1 being the square toilet seat on the circle toilet bowl. Number 2, probably, most likely you don't want to be sitting leg to leg or be able to hold hands with a person that you're sitting next to when you're taking a dump. You should probably have some sort of barrier between yourselves.
Let's take a look at this truck stop. Oh, God, this is gross. This is, wow. Oh, wow. This is bad. The smell is just, oh my word. Oh, that's just disgusting. I'm out of here.
But as ridiculous as that is, I cannot tell you how many times I've had to squat literally right next to people with nothing in between, taking a dump while other people were sitting there squatting, reading the newspaper. One time I saw a guy playing Game Boy, for God's sakes, in this trough area of absolute filth. It's so disgusting. So compared to that, what an epic improvement. Great use of government funds. I've been getting weird emails and messages, and it turns out it's not a coincidence. I'm being targeted. But these days, there's more attacks than ever, and it's not just me who's being targeted, it's you too. And that's why I'm proud to say that today's video is brought to you by Guardio. Guardio is the best browser extension out there for security. After I downloaded the extension from the Chrome or Edge store and ran the scan, I was absolutely shocked at how many malicious things were already on my computer. Running Guardio not only cleans up existing threats, but in real time, it blocks them from happening in the first place. From Facebook scams to malicious extensions, Guardio blocks them. If you think a traditional antivirus will keep you safe, you might find yourself locked out of all your accounts. There is a security gap between the new threats and scams out there and the traditional solutions. Guardio is tackling this exact security gap by developing in-house methods that detect the scams and malware that no one else does. From YouTube scams to shipping scams, Guardio blocks them. From crypto to email scams to remote access Trojan attacks, Guardio blocks them. From abusive push notifications to tech support scams, Guardio blocks them. Guardio will also alert you real time with up to 5 different users on one account if your information has been leaked out there. Go to guard.io/Laowai86 and get Guardio now. And join over 1 million users and protect your online browsing and information. Avoid installing malware and falling victim to scams and get real-time alerts when your information could be at risk. So if you want a clean and secure browsing experience, again, go to guard.io/Laowai86, the link's in the description, and you're gonna get 20% off after your free trial. Thanks. Of course, we know that China's infrastructure does have issues. And in this case, a lot of things are built just for the sake of building them. China will say, hey, we need to have a walkable city center so that we can be, at the forefront of propaganda to show how amazing our government is to provide for its people. What they end up doing is squandering a lot of money in corruption because they'll use hollow building materials. Now, I saw this, I went through ghost cities around China, and I saw that a lot of the concrete was actually made with things like cardboard or twine. They will literally cut any costs possible because they're getting so much money from investors or the government. If there's a way to cut costs, if there's a way to kind of make things cheaper and kind of half-ass things, or as we say in Chinese, 差不多, then they will do it. They will do it for sure. Especially true when the government is involved. Now, are some of these projects that we're going to talk about as ridiculous as this? You tell me. This is a ring toss game at a Chinese carnival with a goose taped to a chair. Can you get the ring over the goose's neck? That is the ultimate question. Now, this is not a government campaign, but I just literally could not help myself from including this clip because I just can't imagine how much of a tizzy animal rights people will get in and how embarrassed the Chinese government will be to know that this exists. Anyway, moving on from the gooseneck. China's infrastructure has a massive problem. I mean, this is a clip from one of the richest cities in China, downtown Shenzhen. So this is like the premier place. And something I noticed in China, they just can't get their drainage right. They've had tunnels flooded in the past few years where up to 1,000 people have died. They have had situations where entire cities just get submerged. And it's almost like there's flood season. Like, you have that in like underdeveloped countries, but China's always trying to laud itself as some sort of like socialist beacon of infrastructure, and they just can't make anything well. I mean, there's just so much money being put into propaganda to make China look good when in fact they can't even get basic drainage right. And that's just the truth of the situation. So think about that when you want China to build your infrastructure projects in your country, because this just happened. This is in Chongqing, China's new darling child city. They want everyone to go there and film it. They think it's fantastic. And it is just becoming a sinkhole. There's giant areas where stuff is just falling. They don't plan out the building. They don't plan out the construction. They don't plan out where things should be. And stuff gets literally sucked into the earth. It gets sucked down into the pit of hell. But if you thought that was stupid, if you think the lack of infrastructure in cities and creating massive sinkholes and billions of dollars of road infrastructure going away is stupid, then you won't believe what China's been doing recently. I've actually just been trying to wrap my head around this one for a really long time now, and I cannot believe this, but it looks like China is trying to put itself back in like Mao's time with some new farm initiatives. Xi Jinping apparently has been declaring that only certain crops are allowed in certain areas. So it's trying to be like a top-down planning on where people can grow certain things. So China already has a big problem with agriculture. They don't make enough food. They have to import like a huge percentage of their food, which would cause complete famine and disaster if China was cut off from the rest of the world. But here we can see thousands and thousands of pieces of farm equipment that are being confiscated by police. And that is because apparently they were going to be used on a farm that was growing the wrong crops, or at least this is what's being spread around in China. They've been sending around police to go destroy crops that are not supposed to be there. So let's say you grow grapes because you want to make some extra money, they will cut down the grapes. If you're growing wheat where it's not supposed to be grown, they will cut down the wheat. If you're growing potatoes, but you've been designated by the central government that you're only allowed to grow sorghum, they will rip up the potatoes and actually send police to arrest you, throw you in jail, and fine you, and rip up all your crops. This is so unbelievably counterintuitive to how China should be run. It already has a really dysfunctional government that is completely rotten to the core with corruption, but there's always been this weird gray area where people can kind of do what they want to make ends meet, to make a little bit of money. Keep in mind, the average Chinese farmer that I spoke to pretty much earns less than $3,000 per year. And this is usually a whole family that has to rely on this income. People in the Chinese countryside already have a huge problem making a salary. And keep in mind, a lot of the farmers I spoke to, pretty much the vast majority of them actually, make less than $5,000 a year in China. So imagine you're already struggling to make ends meet, so you make a bumper crop of something else. Let's say you want to make some money off some fruit on the side on your plot of land. Well, you can't do that now in a lot of these areas because the government has decided to delude itself into thinking that its plan is better than people trying to take care of themselves. Think about that for 2 seconds before you think China is some sort of socialist paradise. It's a socialist hellhole because there are no social programs. China doesn't take care of its farmers or elderly. There are no social programs for them, and they will destroy your crops when you try to make enough. I mean, what is this? This is Soviet Union and old China coming back again because it's the same playbook. Xi Jinping in current China is using the same playbook as Chairman Mao did, which caused tens of millions of deaths. I don't even want to get started on all the, falling buildings and tofu buildings and the horrible, horrible construction. The stuff that was made in China 50 years ago is a hell of a lot higher quality than the stuff that's being built now, to the point where they have to actually get rid of all these extra buildings that they've made. There have been trillions of dollars spent on all this real estate investment to make China look rich. But what they've done is created entire cities for hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people in some cases, when I was touring through China, that have no one in them. The only way that they can deal with this is to actually just wreck all of these buildings and reclaim the land because they went nowhere. And think about how many millions of people lost out on their investments on all these ghost cities. A lot of people weren't paid back from the banks or the central government. In fact, a lot of those bank protests that you might have seen a while back in Hunan and stuff, they haven't been resolved. The Evergrande crisis hasn't been resolved either. The other day, a massive new piece of bridge fell down. These are the amazing infrastructure projects that you see in China all the time. Amazing China, so developed, so on top of things. Look at the decaying infrastructure of America and the West while China leads the world. For God's sakes, they just finished this underwater tunnel. A massive, beautiful project that was all over Chinese propaganda. And guess what? It flooded and leaked. Do you want to drive under the ocean for miles and then all of a sudden it starts flooding? Oh, wait a second. That already happened in Zhengzhou when they built the tunnel that flooded and over 1,000 people died. And then instead of acknowledging those people's deaths, when people laid down flowers to pay their respects to all the dead, they actually censored off where the flowers were because China didn't want people to know how many people died in that tunnel because it went against their official narrative. There have been fires. And by the way, YouTube, don't freak out and don't age restrict this video. Don't be absolutely ridiculous because I'm not showing any deaths. But when there's fires in China, a lot of people die. And I'm not going to show any deaths. Don't worry. You don't even know if anyone died in this fire. But anyway, when fires happen, do you know why a lot of people die? Why a lot of these buildings get burned out? Because of COVID, during COVID lockdowns, they actually sealed people in their houses. What do you think is gonna happen when you make a government mandate where you seal people in their houses and then there's a fire? What do you think is gonna happen? Not to mention, in a huge swath of China, pretty much everywhere I live, there's bars nailed or screwed into every single window. And by the way, why do you think all those people die in those fires? Oh wait, did you force all the firemen to get negative COVID tests before they went in to actually rescue people? Because yes. And by the way, when you make new cities and new areas, do you actually make working fire hydrants? Oh, that's right. Due to corruption in the Chinese government, a lot of times, and this is becoming a massive issue right now, a lot of the times the fire hydrants don't even work. They make the metal shell of a fire hydrant. And then when there's a fire, which they don't expect to happen, of course, they try to go and get the fire truck there to hook up to the fire hydrant. And guess what? The fire hydrant was never hooked up to water because it's fake. They'd rather pillage the money from the government. And due to government corruption throughout all of China, people die, and they have to try to use a little tiny hose connected to someone's house, which of course isn't going to reach. Do you guys remember the massive, huge bragging rights that China tried to get by saying that they came up with hundreds of thousands of these COVID capsules? These little quarantine facilities where you and your family can be starved to death inside one of these little metal container ship things. The idea was that if you created all these COVID kind of camps outside the cities, you could bus people over there, they could quarantine and then come back to real life when they're kind of over the virus. They built so many of these. They built cities of these. They built hundreds of thousands of these metal containers to have people kind of chill out. And by the way, while they were building all of these, while they wasted all of this carbon and fuel and resources and metal and manpower and GDP, all of this stuff, while they threw all of this at this big project, China decided to remove the COVID restrictions and declare COVID over. In fact, you can't really even talk about it anymore. Across China, they've been putting up like sensors over all of the reminders of COVID, like wear a mask and check your temperature and get a COVID test. They're trying to cover all that up because they don't want people to talk about it anymore. Meanwhile, they built hundreds of thousands of these containers. Think of the sheer waste. They'll build things like tourist bridges where everyone is encouraged to go dance. Oh, look at this amazing tourist bridge. They'll get like a mandate from the top, and the government will be like, hey, we're gonna make this area where everyone can stand on a see-through bridge. And they'll be like, wow, see-through bridges, now that's cool. We saw that goes viral on TikTok, and Westerners think it looks really awesome. So since it makes our China look good, we'll build a lot of these. And guess what? They collapse. What do you expect? What do you expect when there's no oversight and tons of government corruption in the building quality of this stuff? By the way, not showing anyone dying here, so YouTube, get off your paranoia wagon, please, and leave me alone. Anyway, what do you expect when this kind of stuff happens? What do you expect when every frickin' city and mountain in the country is encouraged to build some sort of sky bridge because it does well on social media and therefore it promotes China's propaganda campaign of trying to make China look good? What do you think actually happens? I wonder if there's a lot of oversight. Well, this guy decides to go over a cliff here and, oh, well, whoops. What did you guys notice there? Anything? You notice anything there? Well, obviously this is down to the fault of the person that actually set this up, but this is what happens when you have massive government campaigns of building things randomly and haphazardly in China with no oversight and government corruption, is that people aren't trained, the harnesses aren't made properly, the bridges collapse. There were multiple transparent bridge breaks across China. They come up with all these grand ideas and government initiatives to make China look good, and then in the end, you end up with oversight like this, where this haphazard situation happens. By the way, this guy notices that his harness comes off, and he looks at it, and he's like, hey, and his face is kind of like, oh, woe is me, that's fine, at least I made it. I would literally attach myself back to it properly, run back over there and throw that guy off the cliff, because that is absolutely insane. What a Chad for like not freaking out over that. I don't know about you, but I don't want the Chinese government to have anything to do with any bit of infrastructure or government programs or anything in my country, because they have proven time and time again to provide literally nothing of substance. If the Chinese government could be one person, I think this would represent it absolutely perfectly. You gotta ask yourself, how much is this being sold? And of course you have all these like Westerners in the background that are like, oh my goodness, this is just majestic. How does he paint such beautiful stuff? This, to me, this is the CCP's substance. This is the CCP's value. You just know someone's getting paid for this. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed that video. If you did, I really highly recommend you go check out my live show. It's called The China Show, where I cover China's news and current events and everything that's happening within China, especially the stuff that they don't want you to see because China doesn't allow foreign reporters to actually get content out of there. But we know people in China. They help us get material and stuff, and we talk about that every single Friday on The China Show. So please go down the description and check that out down below. Thank you very much, and I'll catch you on the next episode.